Gracious Father in heaven, we thank you this evening. Thank you for all you have done. Thank you for your presence with us. Thank you for how you have seen us through the day's activities. Lord, we pray and ask this evening as we commence this evening class, Lord, we pray you be with us in Jesus' name. We pray that you guide and be with us and order our steps in Jesus' name. Jesus' mighty name. So, without wasting much of our time, let's just have a brief recap of what we did in our last meeting. So we've covered a lot. We've covered the types of the list dictionary. We've covered condition, and we've also been introduced to the four in our previous meetings. So today we'll just be continuing with the for loop functions and class. So for loop function and class. So let's just quickly run this to be sure that we are on the right track. We stop in the previous meeting. All right, perfect, perfect. This is working just as it was last class. So let's proceed by creating a simple use of this for a simple application of it. Now let's create a new file called case game. Let's quickly create a new file called case.py 1 minute. So for this, we'll have to import a library in Python which is called random using so this is how you import stored already on your VS Code. We'll be looking at how to actually install new libraries which have not been installed on your VS Code later. So by importing the first library will be used. So let's create the number of trials we want to give the user to have. So let's say number of trials equals to 3. So it means if the person enters incorrect input, we give the person the opportunity to try it once again, the second time, and at the third time, we can print out a message to the person that, oh, what you've been doing is not correct, something like that. So we've set our variable number of trial to be equal to 3, which you can actually modify to the number of trial that suits it. So now, what do we want to do? We want to create a for loop of which it loops through the number of trials. So how do you do that? We say for trial in number of trials. What does this mean? It's saying, okay, we are looping through the number of trials. Now, let's ask for the user's name, just like we've done for the condition. Yes, let's just use the condition you've used before. Coming to the condition file, let's just copy all of this, get the user's name and all of that. Control C, and come back to our casing and just paste it here. Control V. Now, it is looking great already. Now let's see what's happening. Let's try to run this code. See what's happening now. Just a brief recap of what we are doing. We are looping through the number of trials. So for the first trial, it's going to ask for the name of the user. Check for the length. If the name length is less than 2, what do we actually want to do? We are saying is invalid. Expect name more than 2. If name length is greater than 20, we are returning this. So else, if the name is meeting up with our demand, we want to print name looks good. So let's run this and see what the output will look like. Let's see what the output will look like. Python, yes, there's so is returning an error, type error if object is not iterable. That's on line 5. Yes, this is where the issue is coming from. Now we are saying it should look through integer, which is not possible. So we use range. So range is also a built-in function in Python. It gives you the access to look through it from, like it's going to give you 0 to 2 without 3 being included. So let's run this and see. So it's asking for the name of the user. Let's say the name is AY, as we said earlier. You can see it's saying AY is invalid, expecting name to be more than 2 characters. And you can see it's bringing in, it's giving us the opportunity to type in the name again. If we put in YA as a name as it should also tell us that YA is invalid, expect name to be more than 2 characters. Now, if I put in another name that is invalid, like having more than 20, as you can remember. So let's enter. You see, whatever I entered must be less than 20 characters, and you see, it stopped because we said we should have 3 trials. Now, you might have seen this code is working well, but there is a bug in it. Now, there is a bug in the sense that if I try, let me run it again so that you can have a true about what the bug is. Now, if I'm putting in the name to be Opeyemi, for instance, I'm expected to see name looks good and immediately break out of the loop. So if I press enter now, you see it's telling me Opeyemi looks good, but it's still prompting me for the name again. It's still prompting for the user's name. Even if I put in another name, Philip, it's still prompting me again, name. And this is not what we want. We want a situation whereby once the name is correct, it breaks out of the loop. That is, it terminates. So it happens to be that in Python, there is a reserved keyword called break. So this function to break whenever this else statement is run. So if we ever end up having whatever the person entered looks good, they want to break out of the loop. We do not want to keep running the loop. So let's run this one more time. So now we are out of the first function. Now let's start again. Let's run the file again. And name is asking for a name. If I press in AY, as expected, AY is invalid, expecting name to be more than 2 characters. So if I press in something like Johnson, so what should happen is it should return to me Johnson looks good and it should break out of the loop. So let's see that. Perfect. You can see Johnson looks good and immediately the code terminates. So that brings us to the things we can use for loop for. Now remember, it's going to only run 3 times. 3 times. So you can always change it. You can always change it in to the number of times that suits you. So you can now begin to see the functionality of for loop, whereby it gives you the power to, okay, we do not want it to be infinite. Now, when we are looking at while loop, that's where the contrast is between for loop and while loop. For loop will run until a particular um, condition is met. While loop will keep running indefinitely. You cannot limit it. It can run up to 1,000 times, provided the condition is always true. If it is true, it keeps running. If it is true, it keeps running. And that will be bringing us to an example also with the use of while loop. Now, we've done something like for trial in range and all of this for the name, for the guessing. For the guessing, I don't even think that's a proper name to have named the file. So we've been able to see that we can actually give the user a lot of opportunity to enter the number of names as he or she likes, which we give the person to have 3 number of trials. So now let's look at the while loop as a topic in particular. Now let's open a new file. Let's create a new file called while. Why does py is set already? Now let's run. Now condition is true. it will keep running. It will keep running. Now let's take for instance, we want to create something related to the naming what we did on guess.py. Let's take for instance, we want to do something exactly. We don't want to replicate it. Now, let me just copy all of this. Let me copy all of this, Control C, and come back to my while loop. Now, Control V. Now, I've copied everything, but what you might see will be different is the fact that I will be using while loop. This is true. Now, what is true? So we can come here and say before line 1, we can say we can instantiate, we can create a simple variable like count. Create a simple variable like count, which is equals to 0. Now we can say why count is greater than, why count is less than or equals to 3. Now, what does this say? Count initially is set to be 0. Now we are saying why count is less than or equals to 3. It means when this condition is true, what do you actually want to do? Now we are saying, now initially count is set to 0. It means if 0 is less than or equals to 3, then it's going to run everything. It's going to run everything. Now, one more modification that I want to do is the fact that I want to, but before that, let's just look at the code. It looks fine, but there is something that will happen. This code will keep running indefinitely. Indefinitely. Because why? Because count will always be equals to 0. Count will always be equals to 0. So how do we handle this situation? You can just come here and say count plus also 1. Now, what am I doing? I'm actually increasing it. I'm saying, okay, once this, it gets to this if condition and it's able to print out this on the terminal, modify the count to plus 1. It means 0 plus 1. It means it return the count to 1 and then rerun the code. Now, the same thing I want to do is, now you might be wondering why do I have to do it for the 2? Now, this is because if I'm not doing it for the second one, it will only be counting for when I put in the name less than 2, but it won't work when I'm running it for a name greater than 20. So let's quickly run this to see that it is working perfectly well as you might have thought. So write while. Now it's prompting me for my name. Let's put in AY. Now you see, it's saying AY is invalid, expecting name to be more than 2 characters. So if I put in PA as well, it should prompt me the same thing. And if I put in the last one, what can that be? Let's say we put in another one like ZAP. So you can see, it's saying AP is invalid, expecting them to be more than 2 characters. We still keep having, we have about 3 loops. Let's put the last one. Let's put in PA. So you can see it successfully ran. We're able to completely build the same thing but with different approach. We're able to use a for loop and we're able to use a while loop. Now we can actually modify this by saying if all of these, instead of using the break, we can have actually created this like removing the break keyword and run something like this. It should still work perfectly. Now let's run this again and see that that's without the break keyword. Now it's asking for me. Let me put in a valid name. Philip. Philip is a valid name and it's not doing anything. I think that's because it's not part of the while loop. Yes, that's because it's not part of the while loop. So if I pass it again, it's because it's not part of the while loop. And if I pass it again, then it should tell me, okay, one last time. Wow, this is running indefinitely. This is running indefinitely. Now, this is the example of when what I said the other time, that it will keep running indefinitely. Now, take for instance, it's not actually prompting me for input, but I want it to run through a lot of numbers. It will keep running until it crashes the memory of the system. So you just have to be very careful while handling your for loop. So let me just quickly delete this. So basically, this is how you use your while loop in this is how you use your while loop in Python. It just works like it just works similar to for loop, but the difference is the fact that for loop is you can use it over a range of possible values, but while loop you use it provided a condition is true. Provided a condition is true. So that's how it works in while loop. So we've been able to create something very similar to prompting the user for their name, ensuring that the name is valid. And if it is not valid, we see it keeps giving them the opportunity to pass in another input. It gives them the opportunity to keep passing in another input. So that will be all for the for and while loop. So without wasting much of our time, let's dive into what we refer to as functions. Now, you might have heard me mention function over and over. Even from the start of the class, we've been mentioning function. The likes of this input is a simple inbuilt function in Python. The likes of this length, len, is an input function in Python. The likes of this print, you can see it, is the likes of input function in Python. So we also will be creating our very first function this evening, as we'll be having a simple function that only sum up two numbers. Are we together? It only sums up two numbers. So what are functions? Functions are blocks of code that can be reusable. What do I mean by that? Take for instance, you want to keep adding a values of number, and you don't want to manually start putting a plus b in all of your code all around. You can actually create a function in such a way that you will just run the function and it will do exactly the same thing you want to do. Now, let's look at a code to explain that to us quickly, and let's create function.py. Now, there are basic things you should know about creating function in Python. A short form for define. This is how you create. This is what we refer to as function definition. We are about to define our function. What is the name of the function we want to actually have? Now, let's take for instance, we want to have a simple function called add. Now, what is the sole aim and sole purpose of this function? It's just to add two values together. Are we together? The sole aim and purpose of this function is just to add two values. And as you might expect, you should have two values as an input to it. So how does your function receive an input? It happens to be that you can actually put it here as first number and second number. Now, perfect. Now, we've been able to define our function, although it's not doing anything right now. But this is how you define DEF. Def is short form for definition. Now, you are defining your function. Now, there is what we refer to as function definition and function call. We'll see how you can call a function shortly. So, how does this work? It's just like you are defining a function. Just think of function as the name of a person. Once you call that person's name, the person will always reply to you. That's just a simple way you can think of a function. Take for instance, someone is walking along the street and you just saw the person and you know the person. The moment you call that person, the person automatically turns to you and look like, who is calling me? So that's just how functions work. When you call the function add henceforth, it will be able to kind of do what you are going to write in it now. Remember, I said function is a block of code. Now we can start writing our block of code, but before that, you can see I've passed in two arguments here. two parameters. Two parameters. Now, these are referred to as positional parameters. Now, what do I mean by positional parameter? The position is very important. The position is very important. Now, you can have keyword parameters as well. In a situation whereby you pass in a particular value to it. Let's take him for instance. If the user is not passing any value by default, I can say I can set it to any value of my choice. I can set it to any value of my choice. Now, let's just make this function look great and all of that. Let me import. Let me import. Let me import a library called import random. Now, what is this going to do? I want to be getting different random value every time I run this code. So I can just say, okay, this should be let me set this to random dot rand int. Now it's going to be returning to me random dot random integer from which range to which range. Let's take for instance 0 to 30, and I'm doing the same thing for this int from, let's say, 10 to 20. Now you might be looking like, oh, what has been happening? Now just calm down. Everything is line by line. On line 1, I import a library called random. Now, what is the purpose of this random? The purpose of this random is it auto-generates random number, a single value for you. It returns a single value to you. Are we together? So, first number is going to randomly return a value between 0 and 30. So it might return 10, it can return 20, it can return, but within the range of 0 and 30. Are we together? 0 and 30. So the second number, remember I said this is an example of a keyword parameter. It has key assigned to a particular value, and that's how we call it keyword parameter. Now for positional parameter, we do not need to specify anything before it. So it's saying that for every time the user is calling the function, the user must actually pass in those positional parameters. The user must always pass in those positional parameters. Now, let's start by putting in all of the content we want to see. Now, remember, we said it is a block of code. Now you can see it has been indented on line 4, saying, okay, what are the things you want to do? Now, we can just simply create a doc string. Now, what are doc strings? These are documentation in Python that makes any user who is using your code to understand, okay, this is what this function is actually doing. We can just see some addition of two numbers. Now you can make it neat by having something like this. Set your parameter. You can set your parameter to first. Remember what our parameters are. First num must be an integer. Now, second number must be an integer data type. So we are just writing all of this so that whoever is using our add function will be able to relate, okay, this is what this is doing. So we can then pass in this as well, that okay, what will be returned is, what do we want to return? This should be addition of the second number of integer. Now, perfect. Now, with this, anybody using our function will be able to understand, okay, this is the sole purpose of this function. This is the sole purpose of this function. Now, let's start putting in what we want together. Now, you might want to have the power of which, if the user is entering in a floating point number, you can easily convert it. Now remember, we've set it by default that it should randomly generate a number for us, right? Now, let's take, for instance, the user is now passing in his or our own input. The user is passing in his or our own input. Let's take, for instance, the user is now passing in a floating point number. We want to have the power to convert it to an integer. So we can just come here and say, first number, let's input to an integer. So why are we doing all of this? Let's take, for instance, the user is entering in something like 2.5. We might actually convert it. Or probably, let's change everything to floating. Okay, let's say addition of first and second number of float data type. I think that will be better. Now, we want to also sum up in such a way that if the user is entering 2.5 plus 3.5, we'll be able to sum it up and return a floating point to the person, to the user on the terminal. So let's quickly do that. Float. So how do you do that? So let's take, for instance, the input. Let's first number equals to int. Remember, taking the first number. Now, what are we doing? We are converting this first number, which is a keyword parameter, to a floating point number. It means by default, what will be returned if we try to print out first number? It means the way we run, the thing that will be done on line 15 will be that it converts everything to a floating point number that is a decimal place. So let's do the same thing for the second number is equal to float. Now we convert both the first and the second to a floating point number. Now we want to add two numbers. Now we can just say sum is equal to first number plus second number. Now, perfect. We are just creating a simple function that can sum up two numbers. Now we can now return. Now that's another return. Now, return is another keyword in Python that it gives the programmer the functionality that, okay, you give me all of this input. What do you expect me to return? Now, one thing you should know is at times return and print might want to look alike, but they are two different things. Print will always just print something at the terminal. It does not give you the power to do a lot of functionality with it. But return is actually going to give you that number back. So if you still want to do some arithmetic about it, if you still want to do some modification about it, you can do all of that with the help of the return function. So perfect, we are done with our very first function. Now, remember, all that was done from line 3 to line 20 is what we refer to as function definition. Now, let's call our function. We can just say, let's comment it as function call. Function call. Now, let's call our function by saying add. Now, the beauty of it is, now you can see how it's looking. I only press add, and you can see it's giving me the first number, which is an integer of random.rand, the second number. Now, look at what we've done. Addition of two numbers is what it's saying. Now, we can see now that it's giving us a parameter and what it will return to us. Now, this is the beauty of you having your document. This is the beauty of you having docstring. It makes your code very easy to understand by anyone using your code. Are we together? It makes it very easy to understand to anyone using it. So you won't have to kind of come and start explaining all over and over again. Now, with this simple line of code we have done, if I try to run this, I should see nothing on the terminal. And that is because I've not used the keyword, I've not used the Python input function, which is print, which displays something on the terminal. So if I run this code, even though there is no error there, nothing will be displayed on the terminal. So let's quickly confirm that. let's run our Python function.py. Now, it should just bring up this same something for me again without having to go through anything. Perfect. So what was happening here? We've not printed anything. We have not printed anything. So let's take, for instance, we just want to print. Let's say what's going to return to us is the sum of numbers. And now remember as well, I do not have to individually pass in the input because by default, I've already set it that it should randomly choose a number by itself. So if I come here and run this code again, it should give me the sum of the two numbers, which is 25.0. Now we can make this code look much more reasonable and understandable, whereby I don't know the two numbers that are summed up to give me 25. Are we together? It's just returning 25 to me. If I try to run it again, I'm sure it should return another number, 43. I don't know which numbers are being summed up. So we can now come back to our function call and we can do something like we can now use our print here. Now, what are we trying to do here? We are returning something and we're also printing something. So it means when I run this function, it should return to me what and what number have been summed up, and it should give me the sum of those two numbers. So how do I do that? Now remember, we've set a variable to first num and second num. So we can just using the curly bracket plus second num. Now this is perfect and working great already. I believe that. So let me just edit this code so that it can look good. Control X. Comment it out. Control V. Display. Now let's run this code again. Now I believe this should be working well, and it should be showing us the two numbers that are summed up together. So you can see it's already showing us now that 30 plus 18 is equal to 48. Now we are not doing it blindly, whereby we don't know the numbers that are being summed up together. So you can always run it and it will always give you different number. Now you can see it's saying 18 plus 20 is equal to 30. If you run it again, it should display another output. Now remember, all of this because of the random.randdate which we have set as our default. So if you are not passing in any input to it, it will always auto-generate a random number from 0 to 30 and 10 to 20 and give you the sum of these two numbers. It happens that you can also pass in a particular value as we have said earlier. Now, let's take for instance, you want to set your first number now. You don't want to use the one that has been set by default there. Let's take for instance, you want to set your first number to be about 200. And you want the second number to be about 1000. Now if I run this code again, it should only return to me 200 plus 1000, which is 1200. Now perfect, but remember it is returning it to me as a floating point number, and that's because if I try to make this 20.50 or 40 and I try to make this 10.1930, something like this, it will still be able to solve it and give me what my value ought to be. So basically, this is how you call your function in Python. So we've covered a lot this evening. We've actually seen how you create your own function, that's function definition. We've actually seen how you can even call a function, and we've seen what we refer to as keyword parameter. Now, the input you pass in here are referred to as your arguments. So do not mistake them for each other. They are referred to as an argument. Now, you pass in your arguments here and you pass in your parameters here. So it basically, let it stick to the back of your mind that when you are defining a function, the the values in between the parentheses of the function is referred to as parameters, and the one passed while you are calling it is referred to as argument. It refers to as argument. With all that said and done, let's look at the final part of this Python programming class, of which we'll be creating a class. Now, what are class? Now, before I move to class, remember I said Python function are reusable line of code, blocks of code that you can actually reuse. Now, take for instance, I want to start summing up. Let's take for instance different scores of students. Different scores of students. Let's take for instance their test and their examination score. I can now start doing that instead of me having to write all of this line of code from line 3 to line 23. That's about 20 lines of code. I can actually just keep saying, okay, print add. If we do the add, so I don't have to manually start doing the addition again. So you can see we are able to just keep reusing this line of code that we have generated. So we can now see that we've created our very first function, which is called add. So if I run this line of code again, it should actually generate about 3 outputs for me. Now, the first output, as you can see here, 20.4, that is the one I passed in. The second one is the randomly generated one, which is giving us this. And the last one is the randomly generated one, which is giving us this. This is just a coincidence. It does not happen always, of which you have 11.0 and 15.0 at the same time. So let's run it again and see. Now, it's still randomly generating the same number. Wow, that's surprising. I'm not expecting it to generate the same number. Now, this generating actually which I expected it to be generating random numbers. All right, but that's just all. That's just the basic thing I want to show us about function. Now let's do a bit of modification about this, by of which will be leading us to the creating of class. Now, what do we mean by class? Now, class is just more or less like a function, but it is a kind of container for all of your functions that serve a particular purpose. Now, what do I mean by that? Take, for instance, you have a class that what it does is just mathematical arithmetics. Now, you can have a function of add in it. You can have a function of subtract in it. You can have a function of multiply and divide. And that's what we'll be doing to wrap up this Python class. So let's create our very first Python class right now. So we can call this class.py, new file. So let's now the necessary things we'll be using. Let's import random as well. Let's import random. Now, how do you create a class? Now, it happens to be that there's a reserved keyword in Python which refers to as class. Now, you can't use the word class anyhow in Python. It is a kind of reserved keyword. So now you have class. Now, what is the name of the class you want to have? Let's take, for instance, arithmetic. Arithmetic. Or let's have it as, let me see, just a minute. All right, you can see have it as arithmetic. Now, you might be wondering, why do I have it in uppercase? That's how class are written in Python. You start with your uppercase and you have everything like this. Then you have your colon, which you can even have something like this. Now, arithmetic is a class now. Now, in this arithmetic, as you might have imagined, for arithmetic, just simple arithmetic, you can have a definition of add. You can have a definition that is a function, but in this case refers to as method. Now, this is the difference. Function is just a block of code, but method are kind of, it means there is a class, and in that class there are functions. So those functions in it are referred to as method. So that's just the scenario there. So we have the add, we have the subtract, we have the subtract, we have the divide, we have the multiplication. Now, before we end the class this evening, we'll be looking at creating a simple class of arithmetic to actually do all of this for us. Now, what do I mean by doing all of this? It will be able to add, subtract, divide, and multiply all at once. Just call the arithmetic class and you see it working perfect. Now, it happens to be that for your class, there's what we refer to as define init under double underscore init. Now, this is the initial value. This must always be in your class. There is no way you are, there's no true way about it. It must always be in your class. And for your class, it must always have the first keyword positional parameter, which is self. Self. Now, what are the true values we want? Remember, we just want two numbers from the user. First, and second number. Now, we are already telling our class that, okay, from the user, if the user must always supply first number and second number. Now, you can then say self is equal to first number. Now, let me quickly do the second one. Now, is equal to second. Now, what have I done on line 4 and 5? I'm actually saying, okay, in this class I'm about to create, I will henceforth be referring to self-norm, self.first-norm. Anywhere I see this first norm is set to a variable now, which is self.first-norm. So in any of my function or method, as you might have seen it, the way I will be referring to first norm is then self.first-norm. Now, for all of these methods, they must have something referred to as self, and self. So now let's quickly bring in all we've done for the addition. Just copy that, since we've done something like that. So let me just bring in everything. Let me just bring in everything. Control C. And I come to my class. And then I can come in. Control V. Now, the difference here basically is the fact that, remember I said we won't be able to refer to first norm anymore. You can see we won't be able to refer to that via first norm. So we must use self. So how do we do that? So this first norm, self dot first norm. The second one will also be self dot second norm. Self dot second norm. So that's basically the first part for the additional part of it. Now, for the subtraction part of it, now, for us to actually get this subtraction part perfectly correct without running into any kind of error, we want to subtract two numbers, right? Now, we can actually have done the same thing. Yes, we can do the same thing. Let's just copy and paste. Since we know we can have negative values when subtracting, so we can have done the same thing. Let's just indent this. Let me give it a tab so that they are aligning together. So I can change this to self dot first norm. I can change this to self dot second second number. Now, the difference here would be the subtraction sign. Then I can change this as well. Now, the next is the division part of it. Now, you might be wondering, all right, now we want to actually have the power to control what the user is entering there. What do I mean by that? We know that anything divided by 0 is impossible, So we can quickly check out for what the user is passing in as the second number. Check the user input for the second number. All right. Now, if this is where you use your condition, if second number, remember you use self dot second number is less than 0, then you can just print, a message to the user like division is impossible. Division is impossible with 0 as all right. This is working as expected. So we are already passing the message when the person passing this. Now, what do we actually want to do? We are telling the person, once you pass in this, we actually just want to print out this to the person. And then we want to break, or let's just still leave the part. Now, else, what do we want to do? Now, we are saying else, if the second number is not less than 0, then what do we want to do? We want to divide. So first num is equal to, remember, float is going to convert the integer or whatsoever the person enters as a floating data type. Float, then self dot first num, and then we come to the second number. Second number is equal to float self dot second number. Now we've converted the two value into a floating point number. Then what do we want to do? Actually, there is a bug in this code even before I continue. I'm saying if self dot second number is less than 0, that's not a proper way to have put it. It should be equals to, double equals to sign. Now, why am I saying this? Because you can still divide 10 divided by 2, divided by -2. That will give you -5, as you might have imagined. But if I'm saying less than 0, it means it will only just give me this and nothing else is happening. So else, do this. Now, remember, we are dealing with division. Now, what do I want to do with division? I can then say divide is equal to first num divided by second num. So that's just working perfectly well. So we want to display it to the user. I think there's a mistake in this. Let me just change this to solve. And this should be solved. All right. So let's quickly complete this. Now, for the divide, we can then see print. Let's see the number that have been divided. Print f string divided by second num. So we are printing that to the terminal so that whoever is using our code, we actually understand, okay, this is what is happening. Then what do we want to return? We want to return the divide on the screen. What is what we want to return on the screen. So we've been doing a lot already. I think let me just change this to subtract so that I won't be interfering with the method. Subtract. So that's looking great already. Now, the last part is the multiplication. I believe for multiplication, we do not have too much of an issue. Any number multiplied by 0 will give us 0 and all of that. So I can just simply copy this code and paste it down there. Control C, then we can come down here and say Control V. Now, this will be subtract, this will be multiply, multiply. Then we can bring this as multiply, multiply. Then we can change the sign to multiply. Then we can change this as well to multiply. Now, basically, we just completed creating our very first class. Now, a quick recap of what we have done. How do you define your class? You start by using the key, the word class, which is a reserved keyword in Python class. Then you start by using the first letter is capitalized. It's kind of every first letter of your word are capitalized. Let's take for instance, I want to have arithmetic operator. I can just read this. So it will still work perfectly. Or arithmetic operation. Or arithmetic operations. You can have it this way. So every first part of it is capitalized. Now I've also mentioned the init function, which is the one that starts every of our function of our method. So, and we've defined a lot of method here. We've defined the add, we've defined the subtract, we've defined the division, and we've defined the multiplication. Now, moment of truth, let's see if our code is actually working perfectly well. Now, let's call this arithmetic. Let's call this arithmetic. And we call our function arithmetic operations. Now you can see by default we already have our arithmetic operation. Now we can put in our two opening bracket now. Now remember, it must only have a particular, it must have two values passed into it. Now let's say our first number is equals to, let's take for instance random. I don't want to random dot random. I want to take from values ranging from 10 to 20. And I want the second number to be equals to random dot random from, let's say, 2 to 5. Now, basically, I've just setting the value, I've just passing the argument here. I can bring this to the next one. Now, I cannot start saying, okay, let me print what the arithmetic do. If I print out arithmetic, look at that will do. Let's clear our terminal first. And let's have Python class.py. Let's run it and see what the output is. Now we can see an error displaying arithmetic operations. Arithmetic operation takes no argument, but I'm already passed an argument. All right, let's just remove it. Display is taking one. All right, just a minute. Just to let me quickly confirm. All right. I think I just discovered where the issue is coming from. Just type the graphical in it. So basically, where the issue comes from is the fact that I expect what was in line for which should be in it. Initially, I put in T, something like that. So I've just modified that. So back to our arithmetic operations. Now, I'm passing our first number to anything of our choice. Let's take random one of about, let's say we are taking it from 2 to 20. And we have our second one of random dot land from, let's say, 5 to 10. If we run this, let me take, let's run this class and see what's happening. Now you can see it's telling us to return a make of arithmetic operator objective, which has been called. Now we can even use our dot operator and the see we have the add, we have the divide, we have the first number, we have the multiplication, we have second number, even have the subtraction. So now if I say add, it means by default this should add the two numbers I have. So if I want it should show me 6 plus 9 is equal to 15, which is the random number that got generated. If I know it again, it should go to those number being generated. Now you see another number 8 plus 6. If I know it again, it's saying 14 plus 5. So it will always return new value. So I can even come here and say, okay, I want to print out arithmetic dot subtract. Remember, subtract is the bit we just created the subtract method arithmetic dot divide. Then you can print dot multiply. So basically our class keyword. Now, basically, we are able to create an arithmetic operator that takes in two numbers, which is the add, which is the first number and the second number, and it has four methods, which is the addition, the subtraction, the division, and the multiplication. So let's run this code to see if it's actually working perfectly. Let me clear my terminal. Let's run it to perfect. It works. So we can now see that with just what we've written, with the class we've created, we are able to do all of this simultaneously. 19 plus 7, we know that as 26. 19 minus 7, we know that as 12. Now, 19 divided by 7 is already returning to us the floating point. And we know 19 times 7 is already returning to us this 13. Now, what are the advantages we have with the use of class? Now, we can always reuse this class. You don't have to start using, you don't have to start rewriting all of this code. So you can have written this um, class in a particular file, and then you can even call it from another file so that you can actually reuse them in another file. And how can we do that? Now, since we have created something like this, we can just simply put out this. Let's just see one important of it. Now, we have created our class, but we are not using it. Our class file has been defined. So we have it saved. Now let's import it just as we've been importing the random variable. So let's call this, which is our last file, which is import.py, import the file in our classes. Then you can say from class, import utilities. Remember, I said class is a reserved keyword. We can't use class and call it. So I think let me just quickly change the file. Let me change the file. Class. So let's come back from class arithmetic. Now you can see we are able to take from class arithmetic import. We can use the asterisk sign, saying that we want to import everything there. We want to actually import. So let's take for instance, we have a lot of classes there in that file. You can import everything. Same thing as your function. You can actually use them separately from the file itself. So you can now see now what are the content there, you can just use it to do arithmetic. Arithmetic is equal to, now remember the arithmetic operation. Now you can then pass in the values. Let's take it for instance, you have it to be 20, you have it to be 10. So then you can do the same thing for me and say arithmetic add. So if we print out this on the tablet, let's hopefully it works. So that's imports and Python imports. All right, I forgot to put in the opening and closing bracket. Oh, perfect. You can see it is now working perfectly well. Even though we have a file already saved for our class arithmetic, which is this, we can actually call it from it and still work it out. It will still give us the same thing. So we can even come here and say, okay, subtract. So nobody will have known all the stress is going through in creating it. So, and that leads us to what we refer to as packages and libraries in Python. What do I mean by that? Some people have gone through the stress of writing all of all Python code so that you can just reuse them. And what you just need to do is install them on your VS Code and you start using them instantly. Start using them instantly. Let me open my phone so that I can show you some of the prepared Python packages. Some people have actually made available for our use. So just a moment, and that will be all for our Python class. That will be all for our Python class. We've covered a lot from the beginning of this Python class. We've covered all of this. You can see we've covered class arithmetic, the condition, the for loop, and the while loop, the function. We are able to create something like a check for the name of the input using the for loop. We are able to look at the integer data type. We are able to introduce basic syntax in Python. We've been able to look at the list and dictionary, the string, and the while. So that will be all for Python programming. But before we round up, I would love us to create just one simple code as a round up, looking at what some people having a leverage and what some people have actually done. Just a minute. why my phone is open. So that will be all for Python class for now. Let's just create a simple project that can generate a QR code. Yes, a QR code of which people can actually search for. So a lot of packages have been built, so you can actually look through them and see what you can actually build with them. So I don't know why my phone is not open. What you just need to do is go to your phone and search for PYPI, which is for Python Package Index. PYPI, PYPI, which is a shortcut for Python Package. So that will be all for Python programming. I hope you have had a wonderful day. Thank you. Let's pray as we round up. Father in heaven, we thank you this evening. Thank you for those far you have helped us. Thank you for indeed you have been wonderful. Father, we say be thou glorified in Jesus' name. We pray and ask you, Father, that as we continue even with the back end development, that you be with us and guide us in Jesus' name. For in Jesus' mighty name.